We continue now at the top of Daf Lamed Hey Amud Aleph and Meseches Shevuos. This is Shevuos Daf 35a. On the previous summit, the Gemara asked on the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, if Rabbi Shimon has a Gezerah Shavah between Shevuos HaPikadon and Shevuos HaEdus, so we should say just like by Shevuos HaPikadon, there's no liability when it comes to Mazid, when it's done on purpose, so the same thing should be true by Shevuos HaEdus. And the Gemara now answers, Lahachi Kosvar Achmana LaEdus Gabe Shevuos Bitoy Vegabe Tumas Mikdash V'Kadashav. That's the reason that the Torah writes Shevuos HaEdus by Shevuos Bitoy and by Tumas Mikdash V'Kadashav to V'Kulon Nemar Behen V'Nelam, because by all of them, meaning to say by Shevuos Bitoy and Tumas Mikdash V'Kadashav, it says V'Nelam, it says that there was a lapse of awareness. V'Kanan over here by Shevuos HaEdus, Lo Nemar Behen V'Nelam, it doesn't say V'Nelam, it doesn't mention the lapse of awareness, and that's specifically L'chayev al HaMezid K'Shogeg, to say that a person is liable if it's done on purpose just like B'Shogeg, and so therefore again there is liability by Mazid when it's done on purpose by Shevuos HaEdus. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Mashbi'ani aleichem im lo savo usiiduni, sha'amar ish ploni liten li masayim zuz velo nasan. Let's say the person says, I'm administering an oath to you, if you don't come and testify for me that so-and-so said he would give me 200 zuz, and he did not give it to me, hare elu peturim, so in that case they are exempt in terms of Shevuos HaEdus, she'ein chayavin ela al tvias mamon kipikadon, because they're only liable in a situation where there's a monetary claim like by pikadon. Here it's not really a monetary claim just because the person said he was going to give 200 zuz. That does not mean that he's obligated to do so. And the Mishnah continues, Mashbi'ani aleichem kesheteidu li edus shetavo usiiduni. Let's say he says, I'm administering an oath to you that when you know edus for me, then you should come and testify in the future. Harei peturim, in that case also they're exempt. Mimnei shekidma shvuah edus, because over there the oath is before the testimony. They don't yet know the testimony, and therefore there's no liability. And the Mishnah continues, Amad bebeis HaKnesses, let's say the person stands up in the Beis HaKnesses, in the synagogue, V'yamar, and he says, Mashbi'ani aleichem, I'm administering an oath to you, She'im atem yodin li edus, that if you know testimony from me, Shetavo usiduni, that you should come and testify, Harei elu peturim, so in that case also they're exempt, because he didn't specify, he didn't direct his words towards the Edom specifically, he said it to the entire congregation. And the Mishnah continues, Amar l'shnaim, if he says to two people, Mashbi'ani aleichem, ish ploni uploni, I'm administering an oath to you, so-and-so and so-and-so, Shematem yodin li edus shetavo usiduni, that if you know testimony from me, you should come and testify. And then Shavua she'in anu yodin loch edus, now they take an oath that we don't know any testimony for you. V'heim yodin lo edus, however, they do know testimony, however, it's aid mi pi aid, however, it's a witness from another witness. They don't know it directly, they know it indirectly from other witnesses. O shaya echad me'en karav apostle, or let's say they can't testify because one of them is a relative or disqualified. So in this case as well, Harei elu peturin, in this case as well, they are exempt because they would not have been able to testify anyhow. And the Mishnah continues, Shalach biad avdo o sha'amar lehen hanitba. Let's say he sends the message with his servant, or let's say it's the person he's claiming from the defendant that says to them, Mashbi'ani aleichem, that I'm administering an oath to you, Shematem yodin lo edus, that if you know testimony for him, Shetavo usidu, that you should testify for him, so it's not coming from the claimant, Harei elu peturin, so they're exempt in that case as well, until they hear from the claimant himself. The Tovei himself has to say to them that he wants them to testify for him. And the Gemara says, Tanu Rabban, and the rabbis taught, Mashbi'ani aleichem im lo savo usiiduni, sha'amar ish ploni liten li masayim zuz. Again, the case of the Mishnah, the person says, I'm giving you an oath if you don't come and testify for me that so-and-so said that he was going to give me 200 zuz, velo nasan, and he didn't give. Yachol yihu chayav, and one might think that they're chayav, they're liable in such a case. Talmud lomar techta l'gzera shava. The pasuk says techta as a gzera shava. Again, that's the gzera shava between Shevuos HaEdus and Shevuos HaPikadon. Nemer kan techta v'nemer lahalan techta. It says over here techta, it says over there techta. Ma'alahalan, just like over there, but tvias mamon, it's talking about a monetary claim, v'yeshlo, and he has that claim, meaning to say we're talking about a real monetary claim of obligation. Afkan b'tvias mamon v'yeshlo, so too over here by Shevuos HaEdus, it has to be that there's a real monetary claim that creates an obligation. That's the case that we're talking about by Shevuos HaEdus. And the Gemara continues with the two dots. The Mishnah said, Mashbi'ani aleichem keshetedu li edus v'chulu. Again, I'm giving you an oath that in the future, if you know testimony from me, you should testify. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Mashbi'ani aleichem keshetedu li edus shetavo usiduni. Again, he gives them an oath that when you know testimony from me, you should come and testify. Yachol yu chayavin. One might think they're liable. Talmud Lomar, the pasuk says, V'shama kol ola v'u'edo ra o yada. It says that he hears the voice of the curse or the oath, and he's a witness, and he saw. And the idea is misha kadma edus l'shvua. The edus, the testimony, has to be before the oath. It has to be that he already knew the testimony beforehand. V'lo shekidma shvua l'edus. Not talking about a situation where the oath comes first, and in the future, if you should know some testimony, that's not what the pasuk is talking about. And the Gemara continues with the two dots. The Mishnah said, Amad beveis hakneses v'yomer mashbiani aleichem. Let's say he stands up in the beis hakneses and he says, I'm giving the oath, so he doesn't direct his words towards the witnesses specifically, but he says it to everybody who's in the Beis HaKnesses. Amar Shmuel, Shmuel says, Afilu Eidav Beinei, and even if the witnesses are among those who are in the Beis HaKnesses. The Gemara says, well, Pshita, well, that's obvious. Of course that's the case. If there were no witnesses, then the whole case doesn't make any sense. The Gemara says, Lo no tzrich, it's necessary to koyil avayu, that he's standing right by them. They're next to him. So Mao Detema, what might you have said, Command Amar Luhudami, that it's as if he said it to them. Kamash Malon, again, this is teaching that he has to say it directly to them. That is not sufficient. The Gemara continues, Tanya Namihach, we have a brisa like this as well. Let's say a person sees a bunch of people who are standing, the Eidav Beinein, and among the group of people is his witnesses. The Amarlan, he says to them, Ashbiani Aleichem, I'm giving you an oath, Imatem Yoden Li Eidus Shatavo Suiduni, that if you know testimony from me, you should come and testify for me. Yachol Yu Chayavin, one might think that they'd be liable. Talmud Lomar Vuhu Eid, it says in the pasuk that he is a witness. Vaharei Lo Yichad Eidav, he hasn't designated, he didn't direct his words specifically to the witnesses. Now, one might think, Afilu Amar Kol Ha'omdin Kan, that even if he says everyone who's standing here, Talmud Lomar, the pasuk says V'hu Eid. It says again V'hu Eid V'hari Yichad Eidav. In that case, he has directed his words towards those who are the witnesses. In other words, it was sufficient. If he says Kol Ha'omdin Kan, that is sufficiently directing his words towards the witnesses, and that would actually create a liability. But again, if he just says it in general to everybody that's in the crowd, that would not be sufficient. And the Gemara continues with the two dots. The Mishnah said, Amar l'shnayim mashabiani aleichem. Let's say he says to two people, I'm giving you the oath, and the Mishnah goes on to say that either they heard it from other eidim, eid mipi eid, or maybe they're karov or pasul, they're relatives, or maybe one of them is a relative or disqualified. So again, in those situations, if they couldn't testify, so then there's no liability. The Gemara says, Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Amar l'shnayim mashbiani aleichem ploni uploni. If he says to two people, I'm giving you an oath, so and so and so and so, imatem yodim li edus shetavo suduni. If you know testimony from me, you should come and testify. V'hein yodim lo edus eid mipi eid, and they know testimony, but it's eid mipi eid. It's indirectly from other witnesses. It's a one witness from another witness. So shaya echad mehen karov apostle, or one of them is a relative or disqualified. Yachol yu chayav, and one might think that they're liable. Talmud Lomer im lo yagid v'nasa avono. It says im lo yagid beruuyin lahagada hakasam medaber. The pasuk is only speaking about those who are able to testify in theory, that they're fit to testify. That's where there's a liability by Shevuos ha'edus. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Shalach bi'ad avdo. Let's say his servant is the one that administered the oath, that told them to come and testify, or let's say again it was the defendant that did that. So then that also is not included in liability in Shevuos ha'edus. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Shalach bi'ad avdo. Again, if he sent the message with his servant, O Shamar len hanitbar. Let's say the defendant said to them, Mashbiani aleichem, I'm giving you an oath, Shematem yodin lo edus, that if you know testimony for him, Shatavo, so you do that you should testify for him, for the plaintiff. Yachol yu chayavin, one might think that they're liable. Talmud Lomer im lo yagid v'nasa avono. It says im lo yagid v'nasa avono. The Gemara says, my Talmud, what exactly is the derivation over here? What are we learning from in the pasuk? And the Gemara says, Amar Belazar says im lo yagid ksiv. It says the word lo with a vav. We understand that to mean im lo yagid v'nasa avono. V'im la'acher lo yagid pater. If to him the person doesn't testify, then he's going to carry the burden of the sin, meaning it has to be a direct request from the plaintiff. But if it's la'acher, if it's somebody else that he's not testifying, somebody else made that request, so then in that situation by Shevuos ha'edus, the person will be exempt. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Mashbiani alechem, mitzavani alechem, osarchem ani. Let's say the person uses the language of, I'm going to administer an oath to you, or I'm commanding you, or I'm binding you. All of those kinds of languages, harelo chayavin, in those cases, the witnesses are going to be liable in terms of Shevuos ha'edus. And the Mishnah continues, Bashamayim uvaretz. Let's say the person says that I'm giving you an oath by the heaven and the earth, harelu peturin, so in that case they are exempt. Ba'alef dalid biyud hey. Let's say the oath is being administered with the name of Hashem that's with Aleph Dalid, spelled with Aleph and Dalid, or with Yud Kei Vav Kei, or B'Shakai, B'Tzvakos, B'Chanun, V'Rachum, B'Rachapayim, B'Rav Chesed, V'Chol HaKinuyin. Let's say with any of the Kinuyin, any of the names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that are not the actual names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but descriptions of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, like Chanun and Rachum and Rachapayim, all of those, Harei Lo Chayav, and in all of those cases, there is liability. HaMekalel B'Kulan, let's say a person curses with all of those names, even with the Kinuyim, Chayiv, the person is liable. Divrei Rabbi Meir, that's what Rabbi Meir says. The Chachamim potrim, but the Chachamim say potter, that the person is not going to be liable in such situations. HaMekalel Aviv V'imo B'Kulan Chayiv, again, machlokas between Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim. Let's say a person is Mekalel's father and mother with all of them, even the Kinuyim is Chayiv. Divrei Rabbi Meir says, again, that's Rabbi Meir's opinion, that he's Chayiv even by the Kinuyim. The Chachamim potrim, but the Chachamim say again, by the Kinuyim, we're not going to say Mekalel Aviv V'imo is Chayiv, it's only if the actual name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is used. HaMekal Atzmo V'Chaveiro B'Kulan, let's say a person is Mekal himself or his friend with all of the names, including the Kinuyim, over below Saseh, and then the person transgresses a lo Saseh, a negative commandment, and that is not a Machlokas Tanoim, that is agreed upon by everyone. And the Mishnah continues, Yakacha Hashem, and the Gra takes out the word Elokim over here. If the person says the words Yakacha Hashem, V'chein Yakachem Elokim, or if he says Yakachem Elokim, Zuhi Allah Haksuva B'Torah, that is the curse that is written in the Torah. And Rashi explains, Zuhi Olim Amar La'edim Echad Min HaMikros Shebeklalos. What the Mishnah means to say is, let's say he says to the witnesses, one of the psukim that's found by the Klolos, like Yakacha Hashem B'Shachefes Im Lo Seiduni, he says HaKadosh Baruch Hu should strike you if you don't testify for me. V'chein Yakacha Hashem Kegon Shoya Echad Korei Klolos Shebetorah. For example, let's say somebody is reading the Klolos in the Torah, V'yamar La'edim, and he says to the witnesses, Kein Yakacha Im Lo Seiduni, this is what should happen to you if you don't testify for me. Zuhi Allah, that's considered to be an Allah. To haksiv bohem kechol Allah sabris. It says again kechol Allah sabris, and so therefore that would be considered an administration of an oath in terms of Shevuos ha'edus, and there would be liability. And the Mishnah continues, Al yakcha vivarcheka. Let's say the person says he shouldn't strike you and he should bless you, or v'yetev lach, it should be good for you. Rashi explains, Al yakcha im tiduni. Let's say he says HaKadosh Baruch Hu shouldn't strike you if you testify for me. Or yivarecha im tiduni. Or let's say he says Hashem should bless you if you testify for me. The kafir, and the person again denies that he knows testimony. So again, vivarchecha or v'yetev lach. In those cases, Rabbi Meir mechayev v'chachamim potrin. Rabbi Meir says that there's a liability in terms of Shevuos ha'edus, and the Chachamim say exempt. And Rashi explains, Rabbi Meir mechayev mechlal lav ato shomeyahin, because Rabbi Meir holds from the negative you could understand the positive. Al yakecha im tiduni. HaKadosh Baruch Hu shouldn't strike you if you testify for me. V'im lo tiduni yakecha. So then you say the reverse. But if you don't testify for me, then he should strike you, and so therefore you have a proper administration of an oath. According to Rabbi Meir, that's what Rabbi Meir says there's a liability in that case. And the Gemara says, Mashbiani aleichem, in the case of Mashbiani aleichem, I'm giving you an oath. My kamar, what exactly is the person saying that we consider this Shevuos ha'edus? And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Yehuda says, Hachi kamar, this is what is meant to be said. Mashbiani aleichem b'Shevuot ha'amur b'Torah, I'm giving you an oath according to the Shevuot that's mentioned in the Torah. Or Mitzavani aleichem b'Tzavo ha'amur b'Torah, I'm commanding you according to the command of the Torah. Or Osarchem ani be'Isur ha'amur b'Torah, or I'm binding you with the binding that's mentioned in the Torah. Amar le Abaye said to him, but according to that which Rabbi Chia taught, kovel chamani, let's say he says, I'm chaining you, harei lo chayav, and they're liable. Kovel bo raisa miksiv, is kovel, is chaining ever mentioned in the Torah? Elamar Abaye, rather Abaye says, hachikamar, this is what the Mishnah means to say. Mashbiya ani aleichem b'Shevuot, I'm giving you an oath b'Shevuot, or mitzav ani aleichem b'Shevuot, or I'm commanding you b'Shevuot, or osarchem ani b'Shevuot, or I'm binding you with a Shevuot, or kovelchem ani b'Shevuot, or I'm chaining you with a Shevuot. All of those are going to be effective to create liability. And Rashi explains b'tzavo ha'amura b'Torah. Again, the Gemara initially said that the idea is the tzavo that's mentioned in the Torah, Elah ha'mitzvahs. It uses these terms in the Torah. For example, tzavo, it says Elah ha'mitzvahs, because of the Parashas Nedarim. That's what it says in Parashas Nedarim. But then the Gemara ultimately answered, Osarchem ani b'shvua, means masker es Hashem. Rashi understands that to mean that he mentions the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu be'echad mikol halashonos halalu, using any one of these languages, meaning whether it's mashbiani or whether it's osarchem, etc. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, B'alef dalid, b'yudhei, b'shakai, b'tzvokos, b'chanan, v'rachum, b'rachapayim, rav chesed, whether you're using the actual names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, like Alef dalid and Yud Kei Vav Kei, or whether you're using names that are descriptive, like Chanun, v'rachum, all of those, there's liability by Shevuos or Eidus. And the Gemara says, L'meimer de Chanun, v'rachum, Shemos, Ninu. Does this mean to say that Chanun, v'rachum are considered names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Or a mini, we have a contradiction from the following Braisa, Yesh Shemos shenim chokin, v'yesh Shemos sheinim chokin. Some names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu can be erased. Some names cannot be erased. Elohein Shemos sheinim chokin. The following cannot be erased. Kegon, Kel, Elokecho, Elokim, Elokeichem, Keya, Asher Keya, Aleph Dalid, V'Yud Hey, Shaka, Itzavokos, Harei Einim chokin. All of these are names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that cannot be erased. Avol Hagodol, Hagibor, Hanoro, Ha'adir, V'Achozak, V'Amitz, Ha'ozuz, Chanun, V'Rachum, Erechapayim, V'Rav Chesed. These are all descriptions of the attributes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. All of those, Harei Elonim chokin, they can be erased. And so why is it that in terms of Shevuos Ha'edus, all of these names seem to count as well in terms of liability? And the Gemara says, Amar Abaya says, Masnis in our Mishnah, B'mishu Chanun. What it means is, the person is not simply saying Chanun, the person is saying the one who is known as Chanun, the one who's known as being gracious, and so therefore that's a clear reference to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You don't have to actually say the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. As long as it's a clear reference to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that is enough to create liability, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Lamed Hey Amud Beis.